It's nice to be sharing some thoughts with you on Gulplok. Very beautiful Sunday morning, nice cool weather after the rain in Delhi. I should be out on the balcony where it is so lovely, but the birds were too loud and I wasn't able to make the recording. So I thought I would share, instead of thoughts as people do on Gulplok, I thought I would share some ideas and projects that have sort of taken me over. Not that I've taken on, but that have taken me over since lockdown and being shut in a very small Delhi flat. Of course, as I mentioned, I do have a balcony belonging to the elite classes, or the I think the new sociological term would be the balconied classes of India, who those of us who show our middle class solidarities on the balcony and so on. Like many of you, in a cramped flat, I suppose you also would have noticed how many more things you have than you need, not only the things that you find you needed but were unable to get. And I started with books, and that's where this story sort of leads to, cleaning off bookshelves, which is something that is often thrilling, inspiring, and evokes all sorts of memories and so on. I'll show you some of the shelves cleared out now. So this is all the books lying horizontally and stacked on these shelves are the ones that I managed to clear out, meaning that after my students and friends and so on come and take away what they need, I'll have completely empty bookshelves. These are more of the cleared out books, so I'm going to have a great deal of room after these are all cleared out. This is what I managed to save. These are the ones that I'll be keeping. They have the privilege of being vertical mostly, and yes, the books that I'm saving. So this is where things sort of start. I was also organizing a little bit, realizing that I have a number of books in languages that I really don't even read anymore. In fact, some I can't even remember how to read. So what to do with these books? I'm saving them, but will I just be staring at them as long as lockdown lasts, and then have the relief of not having them stare back at me after lockdown is ended? It got me thinking a lot about this, why it is that after spending so many years learning these languages, I allow them to slip away. I learned Sanskrit as a child, about between 10, 11, 12 years old. My father would teach me, would translate Gita and other works together. It was his fetish. So there's obvious reason why I dropped taking Sanskrit seriously. But I did study ancient languages for my masters, my first masters, Greek and ancient Greek and Latin, and then I went to university in Europe in a multilingual environment where we were required to learn French and German, and then either Dutch or another language. And in fact, that's where I met my wife in Berlin as I was studying German, preparing for my doctoral defense, which was going to be partly in German. And then I went to university for my law degree at Central European University, where I learned Hungarian, and then I started teaching at the university in Rome, where obviously Italian. So spent a great deal of time through my life picking up languages, and in some cases not picking them up, but struggling rather hard, like learning Hebrew. I learned Hebrew at university, and now I can hardly read any Hebrew at all. I even struggle through the 10 Commandments, which are very simple. They all begin in the exact same way, lo, like no, or thou shalt not, as they say. So why do we forget these languages? Obviously we forget them because if you don't practice on a regular basis, there's no reason for them to be retained. All these, this vocabulary, I suppose the grammar doesn't get, the basic structure of the grammar doesn't get lost, but all of the declensions and the verb forms and so on, they fade away by not using them. Now, when I lived in Europe, it was an easy process because I would read the morning paper, I would read a French paper, read a German paper, read a Dutch paper, read a Hungarian paper, whatever. And we read the papers anyway, just as we do in India, many people reading their morning papers in several languages. But now, I don't do that, don't have that access, don't even have that sort of time. And to keep up with an ancient language like Greek or Latin, Hebrew, Sanskrit, something like this, requires really looking at it frequently. And so when I was mastering ancient Greek, I remember one of my first professors said, every day for the rest of your life, when you wake up, pick up a paragraph of Plato or Aristotle or something and read it. Read 10 lines at least. Now, needless to say, I don't do that. And I don't do that for any of the languages. So here is the crux of the problem. If you don't practice them, you will forget them. And if you intend to practice them, it's impossible, because how could one pick up each morning, even in lockdown, a book of Greek, a book of Latin, a book of Sanskrit, a book of Hebrew, French, German, Dutch, Hungarian, Italian, Spanish, and so on. We don't have that kind of time. I have the books, but I don't have the time to stack them all up and open them page after page and so on. And so finally, it struck me as a solution. And that's what I've been working on now, the last couple of weeks. And that's what I wanted to share with you because it's quite exciting. So I'm just going to show you what it is. So this is what I've called here a file, Bible Babble. And I'm actually thinking about creating a website where you would be able to create such a book yourself. What it is essentially, I've started with the Christian Bible, the first book of the New Testament, and so what we have. Wait, is John the first book of the New Testament? Yeah. So what we have is the very famous opening line there in the top right, highlighted in English. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And as you can see, what comes after is translation in Italian, nel principio era la parola, in Anfang war das Wort, in German is next, and then French, au commencement était la parole, then there's Latin in principio erat verbum, and so on. And on this side, I have the Sanskrit, adavad asit, and then there's Hebrew and archai eteho logos, and there Hindi you can see adime vachanta. So what's the point of this? Well, it's first of all, it's quite fascinating to see these are generally older translations, and I've chosen the Bible because it's so simple to get translations across languages. It's also interesting to see how the words of Indo-European and then, of course, Semitic non-Indo-European languages correlate. So you can see from the Latin here, verbum, and vad in Sanskrit, vachan there in Hindi, logos in Greek, parol, of course, this word, parola, word, and so on. Now, so that's just fascinating in itself. But the idea here is that if this is verse 1, and I have all of these different languages to read, I can just continue along the same line. So now I've come to verse 2, and you can see here the same was in the beginning with God. This goes then English, Italian, German, French, Latin, Hebrew, Greek, Hindi. Obviously, I haven't been able yet to find other languages to put in. I'm just getting started working on this, which is why I have all this weird black stuff and so on. So I can add Dutch, Hungarian. What other languages am I learning? I'm learning Spanish now with my daughter. And in fact, this partly came up again from the lockdown with school, online schooling at home. I was tutoring my elder daughter in French, and my younger daughter is learning Spanish, and I was studying it with her. So, and then I decided to take on a translation of Panchatantra. So all of this was sort of swirling around. There's the lockdown. There are all of these books. Do I need these books? What do I do with them? Why have I abandoned them? Can I even read them anymore? Why don't I read in these languages? And I started to this started to percolate into what we have here, and it's fantastic. So you get, you can see all of the different names for the or the different words used. Like we use Parameshwar now. To theos in Greek, Elohim, Deum, Dieu, God, Dio. So what I'm basically saying here is that instead of picking up a number of books, you can just read one verse of a book each morning, and thereby practice, Sanskrit, English. Well, the English, I suppose I don't need to practice it. Italian, German, French, Latin, Hebrew, Greek. You see it in Hindi, see it in Sanskrit, and see the way that the words are related. Start to see patterns that are quite easy. The verb was, erat, ete, war in German, era, was, and so on. And as this evolves, here's the third verse, and then I can just read. Now I haven't finished blacking these out to get what I want from here, but the fourth verse and so what I'll do essentially is, of course, add some other languages like Dutch, Hungarian, and Spanish, and maybe others if I want to try to learn another language. So each morning, then, instead of digging through a number of books, just read one of these verses. Now, this is how it started, but then I realized it's quite boring and repetitive just to read the same verse translated on each occasion. So instead, I'm starting to think about how to create one total narrative that has, for example, if it begins one day in, let's say it begins in French, or we can start it in English. He came unto his own. So this is verse 11. And then next would come verse 12 in Sanskrit, say. And then verse 13, oh, this only goes to 12. So then maybe verse 13 could be in French, verse 14 in German, verse 15 in Italian, verse 16 in Hindi, verse 17 in Greek, verse 18 in Hebrew, verse 19 in Latin, verse 20 in French, verse 21 in German, and so on. And one can read 15, 20, 30 lines or a chapter of a book. Let's say that it is, to start with, the book of John. One can read line by line. For example, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Essa era nel principio con Dio. Alles ist durch dasselbe. So I'm just switching to, line by line, language by language, and in this way, come up with a set of books, kind of readers that people can use to practice each day just a couple of lines of each of the languages that they have struggled hard to learn. And while this file is now called Bible Babble, what I'd like to do ideally, because these are the languages that I study, Italian, German, French, Latin, Hebrew, Greek, and so on. Obviously, these will be different from the ones you study. And so what I would like to do is create a website where, through drop-down menus, you could choose the work, the piece of literature. Like I'm working on Panchatantra right now. Let's say the book is Panchatantra. So each day it would begin with Sanskrit, and then you could choose from drop-down menus which other languages you would like it in. English, Hindi, German, French, let's say. And this kind of what I call a bespoke Babel book could then be printed on demand and sent out to each individual with only those languages that they are interested in practicing, reading in, and learning. So this is what I have started working on now, as a consequence of the lockdown and the bookshelf cleaning, and realizing that I have to do something to regain mastery of these languages that I had struggled for so many years to learn. So I hope you find this in some way interesting and not completely bizarre. A friend of mine who I told the idea to said that I will be the only person interested in buying such a book, Well, I don't want to sell the books. I want to give them away at cost. The idea is to find some way of helping people to learn these languages, or the languages they wish to learn. Hopefully I'll have such a website up and running within year or two, and help me out if you want. Okay, those are my thoughts and ideas for today.